Adrenal glands are another important glands which release adrenaline, noradrenaline, and then glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and so on. We would understand that in a while. But the idea here is, first of all, let's understand a little about adrenal glands. Where are they located? They are small caps on the top of what? Kidneys. So on the top of kidneys, we have two small caps, and this cap-like structure is the adrenal gland. So adrenal glands are located and they are in pair, one on the top of each of the kidney, and this adrenal gland is further bifurcated into two sections, outer and inner. Inner is dark red in color and the outer is less dark. So the outer one is known as cortex. It is called as adrenal cortex. The inner one is known as adrenal medulla. Okay, so the inner part is the medulla, outer part is the cortex. Cortex secretes what? Cortex, as the name suggests, it secretes cortical hormones. These cortical hormones are three: glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and adrenocorticoids. So we would understand that in a while, but all of these are secreted by the cortex area. Now coming on next is the general classification, what is released and what is secreted by cortex and what is secreted by medulla. So cortex, as I mentioned, three of those, we would understand these one by one, and then medulla again, adrenaline and noradrenaline. So the flight and the fight response system, as we know. First, talk about the outer layers. Outer layers is the cortex. Cortex has three important hormones. Glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids again has three important versions: cortisol, cortisone, and cortisterone. All of these help in the regulation or the metabolism of what? Fat, protein, and carbohydrate. So fat, protein, and carbohydrate, the metabolism of this is done by glucocorticoids. Now glucocorticoids basically regulate the amount of blood sugar. Since they are regulating the amount of blood sugar, they, in the case of sugar deficiency, would encourage body to form more glucose. How is more glucose formed? We know well, by the process of glyconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, how the glycogen is converted into glucose by glucagon released by the pancreas. Also, lactic acid or amino acids are converted into glucose by glucagon. So these are responsible, and this glucocorticoids also help us adapt to the stress situation. Any external stress situation, our body is adapted with the help of this. The next is mineralocorticoids or aldosterone. Now aldosterone are very important. They help in the salt water balance. So this salt water balance, where it is important? In the kidneys. It helps in controlling the reabsorption of sodium by the kidneys, and this is responsible for maintaining the sodium-potassium ratio within the body and regulating the internal metabolism. So mineralocorticoids are responsible for salt water balance or the sodium potassium balance. So sodium potassium balance is maintained through it. The next is adrenocorticoids. Now these stimulate the development and maturation of reproductive organs in males as well as in females. So in males we have broad shoulders, deep voice, mustache. The next is adrenal medulla. Now adrenal medulla, two important hormones which are secreted: noradrenaline and adrenaline. Noradrenaline is also known as norepinephrine. The idea is it regulates the blood pressure in the body. How? By constriction of the small arteries that is present. Now, whenever our body is faced with a crisis situation, there can be two responses. One is a fight response Either we would fight with that or we would run away from that. This occurs through adrenaline. Adrenaline or epinephrine is therefore known as an emergency hormone. So control of emotions, control of heartbeat, blood pressure, control of muscle movements, the smooth muscle movements, whether they should be relaxed or they should be constricted, is governed by adrenaline, and it provides a good link between the nervous and the endocrine system. Most of the medullary secretions are released through adrenaline. Adrenaline always prepares oneself for any emergency situation to occur. Now, coming on to the diseases which are caused by hypersecretion or hyposecretion from adrenal glands. So, hypersecretion, there are two important diseases. What are those? Cushing Syndrome and Adrenal Virilism. However, less secretion by the adrenal glands can lead to Addison disease. Now, Addison disease is a disease where the amount of Glucocorticoids and Mineralocorticoids are reduced in the body. As a result, what would happen? The sodium-salt balance, the salt-water balance is not fine, and there are issues which can lead to declining weight. There can be weak bones, osteoporosis, hypoglycemia, reduced blood sugar levels, retention of water, and excessive deposition of melanin in the body. Now, melanin pigment, when it gets excessively deposited, it gives a appearance of a bronzy skin. So, bronze colored skin, and bronzy skin is one of the very important markers of Addison disease. Very important to note. A most important symptom of Addison disease, which is due to hyposecretion by adrenal glands, deficiency of two hormones, glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. Now, hypersecretions. Hypersecretions, as we know, can lead to two important diseases, the Cushing Syndrome and the Adrenal Virilism. Here we have a repeat of the Addison disease, how the bronzy skin criteria is explained here. The next that we understand is the Cushing Syndrome. Now, Cushing Syndrome, which is due to excess of glucocorticoids, would lead to obesity. Now, it would also lead to hyperglycemia, more of the sugar levels in the blood. This would be responsible for thin arms and thin legs. So, as you can see in the picture, weak muscles, thin arms and thin legs, but heavy body and moon-shaped face are some of the typical symptoms of Cushing Syndrome. And one of the major reasons for this Cushing Syndrome is a long-term use of steroids. A long-term use of steroids can lead to Cushing syndromes, and therefore limited use of steroids has been recommended even in the COVID times. The next is the Adrenal Virilism. Now, Adrenal Virilism is due to hypersecretions by adrenal glands, and in females this is due to the growth of androgens which cause male-like characteristics. However, in males, it is due to the overgrowth of cortex which lead to female-like characteristics, and this is known as adrenal virilism. So, three important diseases with adrenal glands. First is the disease due to hyposecretion, which is Addison disease. Bronzy skin is the most common symptom. Hypersecretion, two important diseases, adrenal virilism and Cushing syndrome. Cushing syndrome is important because it is due to long-term use of steroids caused due to excessive glucosteroids in the body or glucocorticoids in the body, and a major characteristic is thin legs and thin hands with higher levels of glucose and a moon-shaped face. So those are the classic characteristics of Cushing syndrome.